Thank you. And a quick check-in. I see Lisa and Ann in the back. Can all of the folks all the way into the back of the room hear me with a microphone? Okay, great. So I'm going to ask tonight, since we are wearing masks, it's a bit of a challenge to hear, even if you speak up, if you would come to the microphone that's here, if you have something to say. So this evening, it's my oath as your elected moderator to be impartial and to ensure a fair and equitable public meeting. As we get started, I want to remind everyone here of a few points of order. So this evening, everyone is welcome to speak. When you do, I would ask that you state your full name for the minutes. If you're not a Jackson resident, if you would please state your hometown. And I'd also ask, as we look around, there's a lot of us here tonight, we want to make room for everyone to contribute, so please keep your comments and questions as succinct as possible. I want to remind everyone that this is not a forum for discussion, so please keep your contributions to a question or an opinion you'd like to state, and our school board members are here to address all questions. If you have spoken and the mood strikes you and you want to speak again on the same topic, I would ask that you just hold that comment until other folks in the room have had a chance to contribute. And finally, a reminder this evening that there are many opinions in this room, and we're here together to share all of them in the best interest of our school and community. So please let civility rule our evening. So as the first order of business, I'd like to ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the checklist. Is there a motion? Is there a second? I think I saw two hands, so Peter, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Second, I'd like to ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the full warrants as we'll review each individually as we proceed through this evening. Is there a motion? Right here, and a second? Great, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
If you could, just for the note taker, just record who made the first motion.
Okay, do you want to?
Yeah, who made the motion on the first?
Peter Benson.
Peter Benson.
And we had a second right here. Will you tell me who?
Beth and Michelle.
And then.
And then the second? Ann. Thanks, Ann Kenta.
Kenta, seconded by.
Is there someone who was the second who would love to raise their hand? Dan Brown.
Brown.
Great, and will you just?
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to move on here. So, Article 1, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,854,739 for support of the schools for payment of salaries for the school district officials and agents and for payment of the statutory obligations of the district, with $14,100 offsetting the amount from various grants. This article does not include the appropriations voted in other warrant articles. This was recommended by the school board unanimously. Is there a motion?
So moved. Joan Aubrey.
Joan Aubrey. And a second? If you're willing to be a second, would you raise your hand and then just state your name?
Jerry Godfrey.
Thanks, Jerry. Is there any discussion or questions with board members at this time? Peter?
You want me to come up there next?
I think it would be great if you would come up just as a practice, because I think, yeah, just so everyone in the room can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Since I don't think there's an airport authority article to speak to it, I'm meeting, I'm here to speak in some way, shape, or form. Those of you, the school board knows a group of us sent a letter to you all last week expressing our concerns about the school budget and various other things. And I think what you see here is a great thing. You see a lot of people here who are supportive of education, and I think everybody here supports the school and the Jackson Grammar School, as we have in the past and we will continue to in the future. Many of us sent our children here to cherish both memories and the quality of education they receive. It's a special place, and we want to continue to be so. Especially over the past 2 years with COVID challenges, the staff and the board is to be commended on their protocols and everything they've done to keep this a safe place. That being said, there are some concerns about the direction of the school that is reflected in both the current budget and the $250,000 warrant article before us tonight. This is really not a flat budget as proposed, but an increase of about $110,000 when you take into account that $250,000 less that we're paying in tuition to Kennett High School due to decreased enrollment. My concern centers around the increased staffing for multiple positions at such a small school. Without going too far into the weeds, there are others that can do that, and in order to let others speak, I would ask the school board to reconsider and reconfigure some of these positions in the budget accordingly. Concerns about the increased school nursing, guidance, and library tech media position increase from 40 to 100,000, 40 to 100% time are simply too much at this time. It was mentioned that many of these position increases are due to COVID and the challenges it brings, but as we just heard at the annual school, at the monthly meeting, we feel like we're starting to turn a corner, and that budgeting for these positions should reflect this. The grammar school is bumping up to 12 full-time equivalents for a current enrollment of approximately 44 students, and an incoming census that shows 2 children per year for the next 3 years. Those numbers may change, but not to warrant these increases. As I mentioned earlier, this is a community that is highly supportive of the school and education, but there are limits. I would motion for a no vote on the proposed budget and a reduction of $100,000, focusing on the proposed increase, on the proposal for increased staffing. Several other concerns about large school buses that mostly benefit other towns, especially in an era of climate change, sign-on bonuses that will potentially pay for a first-year teacher more than they would make in their second year, with no guarantee of retention, and other budget items seem to be not very well thought out and not very well formed. I would encourage the board and the school leadership to get creative, think outside the JGS bubble, engage the community in our neighbor Bartlett to craft an educational environment that is not all about more money, positions, and buildings, which seem to be driving the need for another edition, but be creative in the way that we educate our youth and that has made Jackson so wonderful. Thank you.
I don't know if you made a motion.
Just one second. Peter, I think that I heard a motion in there, but can I ask you to hold that for a second so we can allow other comments?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Clemens, and I'd just like to say that I feel it is wrong for budget. I just wanted to say that I think it's wrong for budgets to grow bigger as family budgets get smaller due to inflation, higher heating, gasoline, electric, food, and other necessities for daily life. I do not feel it is time to be raising this kind of money with this budget. Also, I would like to ask if I'm correct in saying that we have 44 students. Is that correct, Mr. Dale?
Yes.
But 4 of those students are not taxpayer children. 2, if you are not a taxpayer or you are a teacher, you are allowed to bring your student here, the first one for 0 cost, the second one for $2,500. And we have a 4th student who is, or one tuition student who is paying $10,000 while we pay $28,000 plus per student as a taxpayer.
Just a quick check-in with the school board members. There were a couple of numbers quoted in there. Do you want to speak to anything about tuition students? Okay. Any other comments? Anne?
The best of times, I'm hardly here, I know. Ann Bennett, a few things. I want to thank the school board. I was having your seat. I know the hours, the untold meetings that go into preparing for this annual meeting. I personally appreciated however people feel about this budget. I think it's really important to express the respect that we have for the commitment that we have to the kids of our community. And I would ditto like to say that to the staff of Jackson Grammar School as we come out of this phase of the pandemic. We know how challenging it has been, and the deep commitment that you have demonstrated for the children of this community. I personally feel, having worked at the school for 20 years, also having worked at the school for 20 years, I certainly understand the complexities of the facility. And if you think of the 30 years between being a school board member and a staff member, I've also witnessed 2 building additions, the construction of the Whitney Center, the pavilion, thank you, John Marshall, and untold volunteers. We are a facility rich in resources. And I do really think that we need to re-examine our relationship of cooperation with the Bartlett School District, which is also experiencing a decline in numbers. And I do want to ask the specific question about the library media position, understanding that certainly this is a requirement of the State Department of Education. Is it my understanding that with the number of students that we have currently at Jackson's, that is a 20% full-time equivalency mandate, or has that changed?
Change, we have it, Gail was speaking.
Talking about what's mandated for.
Yes.
Yeah, if I might, or you do.
So you have to have a library media specialist that's certified overseeing the program.
Yes.
That's the number one piece. Historically, Jackson has shared that resource with Bartlett. So it was 100% paid for in Bartlett, and then 20% was paid for out of that 100% here in Jackson. So as far as, you could not have a library media specialist here, but it would have to be overseen by a certified person.
That position is currently open.
Yes.
We've not been able to fill that position, and Bartlett needed to have her services full-time, so they pulled her back in to work solely for Bartlett, as they've done with the technology position, which we had, which was actually 40%. I think it was quoted in a prior meeting as 20. So what I've done is recommend that we combine those 2 positions into one and try to find someone who can do both positions and in a full-time way in order to attract. I don't know, you may know, we have many open positions around the valley and have had extreme difficulty in filling many positions. So this was an idea, a technique to try to attract some new younger talent to our valley.
Thank you.
Just one more piece. I know that, I don't see any of them in the room, but historically our library media people have requested every year at budget time to increase from 1 day a week, feeling like they could not teach all of the competencies, see the 5 to 6 groups that they were expected to see each day, collaborate with the library, collaborate with the teachers. So we're interested in expanding that position regardless.
Thank you. Gail, can you clarify for me that this budget eliminates the technology coordinator position because Bartlett wanted to have their position become full-time?
They hired Allison full-time and then were only able to spare the 7 hours or so a week to us. So we now buy our tech services from Bartlett, but not with the original 40% hours that we budgeted when you left the position a few years back. We had hoped to expand that to make that more of a professional development opportunity. because as we all know, technology is exploding in terms of complexity and tools and devices, software, et cetera, and felt like that would be really helpful for our staff to have some support in implementing that through the school.
Two more points.
Sure. Go ahead. And we get close to that microphone, just so
Sorry.
the back can hear you.
There's a fundamental difference, as you know, between the services of a technology coordinator who supports the infrastructure of the performance of the equipment in the building on a day-to-day basis and is in the classroom to make sure that those things are working for teachers. And someone who comes in with the skill set of a library media person, it's apples and oranges, and it is the unusual person who would be able to fulfill both of those positions. And I would just also want to applaud the staff of the Jackson School. They are extraordinary at innovating technology. 15 years ago, when the computer lab went out, significant money was invested in professional development. I'm absolutely understanding the importance of digital citizenship and the position of a library media person. I'm not sure that this is the best configuration, just from personal experience. And I just wanted to also congratulate the teaching staff for being very good at what they do. Your kids are getting a rich instruction in technology right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Tish?
Hi, my name is Tish Hanlon, and I am a parent of 2 Jackson graduates that have gone through Kennett High and now in college. And also, I am the chair of the Whitney Community Center and have been since the Whitney's been here for 11 years. And I was on the board with Ann Bennett when we were building the Whitney. And a little history is that with the school, the whole idea was, and about that time we had about 58 kids in the school, 50 going up to 60. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion about where the Whitney should be. And it was, let's put it up by where the town offices are, or let's put it here next to the school. The public had a hard time because they felt as though putting it next to the school, it's only going to be used by the school. And we're going to take it away from the community. And with this pandemic, indeed, that's kind of what happened. Because we kind of said, okay, school, you use it, it's on the grounds, it's SAU run. And it's worked out great. But the whole idea of this Whitney Center was, it becomes an extension of the school. You have an art room, you have a conference room, you have a gym, an indoor gym, and then you have your outdoor classroom. And then the Whitney Center was asked, how about contributing with a tent so we can still be outside and have more things for the community? And that's all come your way with no problems. And I am so pro-education. And for me to stand here and say, please hit the pause button on these 2 items. One is growing your staff. If you grow your staff, you have to grow your size of your place because every staff person needs a full-time place to be. You can't say, you're in the hallway, you're sharing the room with Susan. I've been there and I've seen it all in there and I'm so familiar with it. But hit the pause button on these 2 items and have the town and people sit down with you guys and really look at. The biggest concern for me is the population of the school all over the valley in Jackson is clearly declining. A lot has to do with housing. And we need to look at that as a town. We need to talk to people about how we're going to change that and attract more families. Because this school is so integral to who we are. And it's such a great town. And I love going by the school. And I'm just so grateful for you for putting in your time, for all parents and all the people who are here tonight. And I just want to make sure this school stays here. And the only way we're going to do that is to keep the population growing and not blow up the budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Tish.
I'd just like to respond to a point that was made a couple times, just to clarify the record. If you go back and review the record over the last 3 or 4 years, We've been struggling with both of these issues a lot, and we discuss it at every single board meeting. And at no point in time will you ever see where those two different subjects overlap. The facility expansion has absolutely nothing at all to do with an expansion in the staff. It never has. It has nothing to do with that at all. We're not creating space for the two positions that we're talking about expanding. It really has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to clarify that point.
I thought I heard Peter also say that question was, are we asking for this expansion in staffing or space based on COVID? And those things don't go together. And so this conversation about space is over the last 5 years since I've been here, 4 years since I've been on the board, the overarching conversation amongst the staff in the building, saying that the one thing consistently is that space is what they need. And then, yep, that's all.
Kate, that's a great point, but to also clarify too, that when you're asking us to be creative with things, in the staff hiring that we're talking about this year, again, we've been discussing this for the last 3 years pretty heavily. It's a workforce problem that every business and every school in the community is facing. And I consider this a more creative way to tackle the problems that we're facing with that.
I recognize that there was a motion to be made earlier, but before we get back to Peter and the motion, I just want to check in and see if there are any other perspectives, questions that folks have not spoken to that they would like heard at this time, or questions answered.
I just would like the board to respond to, so if this is voted down, at least that, the budget with respect to that increase in staffing, what will the school do if that is not in the budget?
So that's a good question, Angus. If you were to reduce the budget by $100,000, as Peter's suggesting, we don't know at this point what we do with that. We would have to dig deep into the budget and see how we're going to accommodate for that. It wouldn't mean we'd be eliminating those positions of media specialists and technology. We still have to have those positions. It's just we would have to reconfigure. We'd have to get, again, creative again to see how we can manage those positions. We could be going back to the old drawing board and basically having no success in hiring a media specialist and technology person is probably what would happen. And ultimately, that does kind of affect things like accreditation. That's kind of why we're going down this road. It's basically, like I said, I feel we were trying to be creative in filling that position because, as every business and every school in this community knows, it's really hard to fill positions right now.
One more quick check-in for questions or any additional comments, and then I'm going to call for a vote. I'm actually going to read the article again so that we can hear it. Call for a vote, and we'll see what happens. Seeing no questions and comments, I'll read this again. So this article number 1 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,854,739 for the support of the schools, for payment of salaries for school district officials and agents, and for payment of the statutory obligations of the district, with $14,100 offsetting this amount from various grants. This article does not include appropriations voted on in other warrant articles and was unanimously recommended by the school board.
It's already moved second.
Point of order, was there a motion to reduce the budget?
That's
You need to vote this down first.
sorry. Point of order, sorry. So this article's been moved and seconded.
Yeah.
As it stands, it's there. It can be amended. If you can make a motion to amend the number, and then we would vote on that. And then, if that's up or down, then we would go back and vote on the motion that's already existing as well. It doesn't have to be reviewed.
So the question is, did Mr. Benson make a motion?
So Peter, the question is, are you making a motion?
Can I do it from here?
Can everyone hear Peter?
I'll speak loudly. I would make a motion on the amendment of the budget down to $100,000 to
$2,754,739 for the general operating budget of the school, with a focus on the board concentrating on those staff positions mentioned.
Just a point of clarification, you would have to amend the whole thing, that $2,840,629, because you have to raise the grants as well, Peter, so. You'd drop that to $2,740,639, if you're gonna reduce that.
That's correct, I'm sorry, I forgot the $14,100.
Yeah. Yep.
Now that we have the number right. So the amended article would be for $2,740,000.
Sorry.
Hold on. Doing some math over here.
You were right, Peter. My apologies. My glasses are 754, 730. You got it.
So a reduction from the article in front of you of $100,000 to $2,754,739. Is there a second? Second. Sarah Clemens for a second. All those in favor? I'm going to ask you for a vote in just a second. Is there anyone who did not speak earlier who would like to discuss the motion that's on the floor?
Was it seconded?
Yes, by Sarah. Okay, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Yeah, I just clarification. In favor of Peter's amendment to the new amount, the reduction of the budget to $2,740,639. And I'll ask for that one.
On the amendment and then on the amended article if it is amended. So the first vote is on the amendment of reducing it by 100.
Yes, correct. To the amount of $2,740,639. Yeah, I'm going to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
I think it's really important inside of this conversation, as we've said, it's wonderful to have everyone here. Come more. We'd like to have this dialogue with you sooner. This has been a conversation that we've been in for multiple years, because what we've seen again and again is that our staff is having a hard time adding to our staff. And in fact, we're losing people. And when McDonald's offers more to people in the Valley than teaching positions, it's really hard to get people to come and add to this educational institution that so many of us, of you, I grew up in Jackson, but so many of you have been able to benefit from. So I want to add that context, because this is not, we've made it a point, as Jerry said, we've gotten creative. This is not a pie in the sky number, and I appreciate the process, and I just want to own the fact that there's been a lot of thought that's got into this to say, how do we not only get a warm body in our school to teach, but how do we get good teachers here? How do we retain good teachers here? If we are at the lower end of the pay scale in the Valley for those positions, if we can't offer people full-time employment, people aren't looking for part-time positions to be able to cobble something together. They're looking to make a more dramatic shift where they can support their family and they can live here. And I think that that can't be understated. And Gail has worked really, really hard in the past couple of years to be incredibly creative and incredibly solicitous to people who are looking for jobs in this Valley. And that's one of the reasons why we made this choice, was to be able to cobble together real jobs for people to have real positions, to have a place in Jackson for real education.
Okay, so the motion that's been made and seconded is an amendment to Article 1, and that amendment includes a decrease in the overall budget of $100,000 to $2,754,739. And further discussion. Yeah, Peter.
Can we just do this by a show of hands? Rather
That's what
than-
it was, yes, yeah.
So people can be counted.
All those in favor, can you raise your hands and keep them raised in case I actually have to count them? Thank you.
In favor of the amendment.
In favor of the amendment, please. Thank you. And all those opposed? Wow. Can those in favor raise your hands again? Thank you. You're pretty darn close. So can you keep them raised so I'm actually going to count for you?
Is this with the reduction or with the 100,000? With or without?
This is in favor of the amendment, which is to reduce the budget by $100,000. Great. And those opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Sorry about that. Article 2, to see if the school district will vote.
Sasha, order. So we've amended Article 1. We haven't passed Article 1 yet. So we have to go back and vote on the amended Article 1.
Thanks for your patience. It's really only my second time doing this, which is why I've got Jerry over there as backup and Kevin. Okay. So we're going to go back and we're going to vote on the new article, which is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate this new sum of $2,754,793 for support of the schools, for payment of salaries for school district officials and agents, and payment of statutory obligations to the district, with $14,100 offsetting the amounts from various grants. This article does not include the appropriations voted on in the other warrants. Sarah, is there a motion? Thank you. Is there a second? And a second? Second. Yeah. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right, on to Article 2. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be added to the Capital Reserve Fund, the Special Education Fund, previously established for this purpose. This article is recommended unanimously by the school board. Now we'll open it for discussion and questions.
So moved. John Roberts.
Second? Second. Barbie. Discussion or questions? None? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? The article passes. Article 3, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be added to the Capital Reserve Fund for school buses, previously established for this purpose. This is recommended unanimously by the school board. Is there a motion?
Move.
Will you raise your hand for me and say your name?
Dave.
Oh, Dave. A second? Thanks. I can sort of see all of you up. Is there a second? Discussion or questions? Peter?
This is my other.
I'm going to have you come up or grab a mic. Just knowing you're good.
My other quixotic quest is to hopefully encourage the board to continue to look at smaller buses for this town. I see a 44, 55 kid bus with 2 kids on it. We should really start looking at smaller buses. Climate change has lots of impacts, but we can do our little part right here. And I think we really need to look at smaller buses. I know we have relationships with other towns where we transport their children, but we need to think of ourselves as well.
Mr. Richards, do you happen to have the figures that I asked you for?
I emailed those to you.
Yes, you did. And I was just looking on my phone to see if I could find them.
Let me check.
Okay, I'll look too. But I did inquire, and I think the largest amount of children that were on the bus was like 18, and I'm not sure if they were all Jackson students or Jackson and Bartlett students. And I was also informed that some of this was due to COVID and people were transporting their children, but I've lived in the same house and I've watched the same bus, and I've seen the same two children on it. So if you can find those.
I have.
Okay, thank you.
So Sarah did ask a question about the daily bus riders, Jackson Grammar School in the AM 18, in the PM 17, Josiah Bartlett Elementary School, 11 in the morning, 11 in the afternoon, the high school, 5 in the morning, 8 in the afternoon. Really the reality is the geography of Jackson as well weighs tremendously into this.
So I think it was our regular meeting that I mentioned this about putting together an FAQ for the town to answer these questions when they come up every year. And they're absolutely legitimate questions, and we should be challenged on these things all of the time. The school bus issue is something that we continue to look at, but we study it every year. But if you go back through the history of the school board, you'll realize that this is something that we consider every year because we're forced to, and it's a good thing that we do. But we're well versed in this. We've studied it very well. These smaller buses, to my knowledge, they use just as much fuel as the larger bus does. And it's really a matter of when we send kids on field trips and things like that, there's no way to have a smaller bus. We could go down, if we went down to like the van size bus, it wouldn't achieve or meet our needs. So we're talking about two different size school buses. One being, I don't know what, Jim, what the actual capacities are, but I think there's a 75 capacity bus and then there's a 40 capacity bus.
You normally purchase a 66 passenger, and then the next size down is a, I think, 45 passenger. And you're right, it's the same engine, it's just less sheet metal.
Yeah. And the cost difference isn't that much either. The maintenance difference isn't any difference. And again, it's an issue that we look at every year. We should put together the information so that when people reference this, we can reference them to this fact sheet and say, this is why we have the two school buses that we do, and this is why we keep an additional third bus in backup in case one of them breaks down. And we'll continue to study it and continue to think about it, but this is fiscally the smartest thing that the town can do for these.
I just want to clarify as well that since the pandemic, we no longer transport Bartlett students. We used to pick them up on the way to Bartlett. We no longer mix the Bartlett and Jackson bus riders.
Susan Ross, parent. I work at the school. Jackson parent, formerly. Anecdotally, you look at the buses and they go by and they look nearly empty. But if it's soccer season or it's Nordic season, we have about 90%, if not 99% of the kids participating in our after-school programs. So it's going to be an empty bus.
Other questions, comments, points of clarification that haven't been addressed? The motion that's been made and seconded is to see if the school district will vote and to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be added to the capital reserve fund for school buses previously established for this purpose. And I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Aye. And those opposed? Motion passes. Article 4, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 to be added to the Whitney Maintenance Trust Fund previously established for this purpose in 2010. This article is recommended unanimously by the school board. Questions or comments? So moved. Second? All those in favor? Aye. I apologize, I didn't ask you for questions and comments because no one was jumping to ask them. Are there any? Right. All those in favor? One more time. Aye. And those opposed? Article 5, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be added to the expendable trust fund, the tuition trust fund, previously established for this purpose, recommended by the school board unanimously. Is there a motion? If you could raise your hand and just, George Gary. A second? Thank you. Discussion or comments?
Could you just explain what that is?
So it's a tuition trust fund. So as of this year, we had a large increase to the tuition to Bartlett from unanticipated students moving into the district. And that's what it's established for. So that I think, what is $30,000 more this year?
It's about 70.
I'm sorry, yeah. It was a $65,000 increase to our this year's operating budget for that purpose. And there's two ways to handle that. We could have a deficit spending article today, which we don't. We have a tuition trust fund so that we can tap into that for these reasons. So I don't know what it's currently at. It's
about
77,036.
Yeah, it's about 77,000. One of the pieces that does occur is you pay a lifetime tuition for Bartlett. So what happened was there was a significant decrease in Bartlett's tuition. You pay a per pupil cost, and a lot of it was due to COVID. So when their enrollment drops, the per pupil cost goes up, and that was a big piece of why you have to come up with that $60,000, $70,000 this year.
And I'd also just like to point out, we've had a tuition increase, and that increases our budget. Just like when we have a tuition decrease, it decreases our budget. That's the way it works.
Any other questions, comments? Terrific. So there's a motion and a second to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be added to the expendable trust fund, the tuition trust fund previously established for this purpose. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passes. Article 6, to see if the school district will vote to establish a Jackson Grammar School renovation and construction capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35-1 for the planning, design, construction, and renovation of the Jackson Grammar School, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 to be placed in this fund. Further, to name the Jackson School District as agents to expend from said fund. This is unanimously recommended by the school board. Is there a motion? A second? Questions and discussion?
Could you clarify, is the $250,000 actually going to carry out the construction cost as well? It's confusing the way it's written.
So we wrote it kind of ambiguously so it could cover all sorts of costs. And one of those costs would actually be the construction of an expansion, could be playground equipment. So we left it kind of open so that it could be spent on a number of different things. So yes.
I'm not sure I got clarity on that, because when I look at the design plans here, it doesn't appear that you could ever construct what you're looking at for $250,000.
No. So I'm assuming the kind of the conversation is going to kind of go to lots of different places tonight, but I was trying to be specific to your question that it could be spent on the expansion. It does not anywhere near cover what the expansion would actually cost. But we could use those funds to actually start construction, yes. But no, just an expansion such as that, one of the reasons why we're asking for that money is that we could figure out how much it would actually cost to construct the expansion. When we were originally starting to look at this, it was about $1 million. And we were thinking that we could probably add about a $500,000 contingency budget to that. Since then, construction costs have skyrocketed, and we really don't know how much this expansion would cost. A large portion of that money, probably about $70,000 to $100,000 of that money would be used to engineer the expansion so that we would know exactly how much the expansion will cost. When the suggestion was made to appropriate $250,000 for this, it was also kind of a down payment towards that expansion.
So that's why the number is so large. And quite frankly, another reason this number is so large is we were hoping that we would get this kind of community response tonight. It's a testament to this community, I think, that whether this article is voted up or down, or whether it's amended to a different number, I think this really shows that the support that the school gets from the community, regardless of how you feel about spending this kind of money on this project or not. I know everybody in this room is here to support the school, so I thank you for that.
I saw a number of hands. Sarah, I saw yours first. And I'm also just going to ask if you could state your name, even if you've spoken before. It's nice to start recognizing faces in town. And so I've been lax. Melissa's back there taking notes for us. And so if you could please just state your name so that she can capture it. Sarah, do you want to come up?
I will wait until these other people that haven't spoken first, and then I'll speak.
Okay, I thought, Tish, I thought I saw your hand next. Okay, so there was, sure, come on up.
Good evening, my name is Paul Blumnier, and I've been reading the article, and it explains what we want to do with this money, but nowhere do I see why you need it. Nowhere. I mean, you're going to want to do planning, design, construction, but nobody has explained why you need it. Can somebody please do that?
So again, this is an issue we've been studying for years now, and the reasoning behind this is that we feel there's a general need for more space in the school. 2 of the classrooms in the old building are below standards for a modern-sized classroom, well, actually, all of the classrooms in the building are a little bit. The other 2 classrooms in the building are also a little bit below standards, but the 2 in the old building are far below standards and not conducive for a learning environment. Makes the current configuration of the building makes it challenging for a multi-age environment to really provide a great learning space for our kids. And that's the primary impetus behind the expansion of the building. So in the expansion, you will see that we increase the size of one of the classrooms in the old building. And then in the newer part of the building, we expand outward of that to get another classroom that is of modern standards, close to it. Again, these are the minimum modern standards of a classroom. They're not even ideal for that, but given our enrollment size, it would meet the needs for the town of Jackson. So the primary impetus behind this is to take what we have now, which is 4 classrooms, 2 of which are woefully below standards and difficult for a multi-age environment, and creates 4 new spaces that would meet the needs for the town of Jackson, so that we would have 4 classrooms that would meet that would be conducive for a high-quality learning environment. We've talked about enrollment over the years, and since I moved to this town in 1977, it's always been a question. Everyone always predicts that enrollment's declining, so why is the school asking for more? And since I've lived in this town, the town's always modernized the school. When I got here, it was a 2-room schoolhouse, or 3 rooms if you count the upstairs, and a small building. And since then, a lot of things have been added to it. And it's about every 10 years or so we add to this. And it's been 11 years since we added this building to the campus. And this is really trying to meet the future needs of the town, so that we can continue to have a high-quality education here in the town of Jackson. The expansion also includes space for a preschool, and that is, again, is a strong impetus behind why we are adding to the footprint of the building. The other things in this building are we were adding an elevator to access the basement, not for people. It's really for moving equipment for maintenance of the building. There's very little space in this current configuration of the building to store equipment. There really is almost none, and so this opens up the basement so that we can purchase things like floor cleaners and things like that and move them around the building easily. So that's the strong impetus behind why we're asking for the expansion of the building. Now, as far as the $250,000 is concerned, some of that money would go towards the design aspect of it. And those can cost anywhere, probably for this construction project, would be somewhere between $70,000 to $100,000 to really kind of engineer the whole project so that we know exactly how much it's going to cost us to build this building. And that's the primary reasoning behind the ask. Again, this is a big ask. It's $250,000 is a large number to ask for. And one of the hopes that we were really getting was that we would get this kind of response and we would get this kind of feedback from the community. And it is really good to see this amount of people here tonight to discuss this. And the balance of that money, we have been working very hard over the last few years to create outdoor spaces for learning. And it's time that we really need to study how we use our outdoor spaces. And we'll need to probably reconstruct some of the playgrounds and things like that. So some of this money might be used for that. And it is also a multi-year project that we would be undertaking in order to do this construction. So some of that money also might be used to spend to actually start some of the parts of the construction, whether it's digging ditches, moving septic, not the whole septic around, but you might have to move septic parts of it around, electric parts of it around. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the $250,000 ask.
And Jim or Kate, about missing a figure there, just feel free to jump in.
I know Jerry mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, this concept of moving or looking at the building and our facilities on our current land here has been for a couple of years now. We started with the preschool, we've done other things with it, and we could have asked and put on the warrant the full amount of, the cost of the building, which would have been, in the millions, but we were trying to be really fiscally responsible as the school board and saying we really shouldn't be asking right now. Let's see where our funding goes, where materials go in the next year or two so that we can come back to that. So we were asking for the 250, put a stake in the ground with the community to say, this is what we would like to do. We've done our due diligence for the past several years. This is something that we believe in. This is something that we need to move forward with our school to keep it accredited, to keep our teachers happy, to keep our students moving forward. So we didn't ask for the full amount. We would have had we did have an estimate for the full amount to be done, but with the building costs exploding, we decided to pull back and be fiscally responsible and just ask for the 250 so that we could start moving forward and to get the community at large more involved. So that's where we are.
So part of my being up here is self-serving. I went full board on the request for $5.7 million for a fire station and quickly got shot down on that. So out of that, though, came a warrant article that we hope you're all going to be here next Thursday to vote on, is for a facilities committee to be formed. And that's going to be a committee that's going to be in conjunction with a member from the school board, a member from the select board, and hopefully many volunteers and town folk that are registered voters, that are part-time residents, so we can establish what the needs are of the community and the town as it applies to the school, the fire department, the police department, the town, every town facility, but also the community needs. How do we get people into the town that we want to bring families in, et cetera. So while we put larger numbers out, whether it's $250,000 or $5.7 million, we really need to decide what does this town need as a community, and it needs to be decided in conjunction with the school board and the select board coming together, so you're not asking for two different amounts and two different goals, I guess. So I just wanted to say that I'm really looking forward to working together with the school board and a committee to decide what is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
I think there was one over here. I'm going to see if I can bring the mic.
Yeah, Joan Aubrey, I have a question. What if the town votes down your addition? What happens to that $250,000? I think I'm a little disturbed that we're creating a big fund. Are we voting on the addition tonight? Because we're spending a lot of money towards it. You even said that this is more money needed. You're asking for more money that's needed to do this study. So I'm just a little bit puzzled as to why we're creating this big fund for potentially an addition when the town has not voted on an addition. I'm sure you've done your due diligence, and I think this is the same situation with the fire department. There's a need, but you haven't sold the town's residents on that need yet either.
Hello, I'm Dudley Davis, and I'm a full-time carpenter in town, and I will say a couple things that I'm a little confused about. One is if you're gonna have someone estimate a building in this day and age, I don't care how much money you give them, it's as good as paper. You will spend your money, and it won't be worth the paper it's printed on. And it could go down, if you're lucky, most likely, none of those costs by the time you're ready to ask for money will have any relevance in what you're asking for. That's one thing. Two, I guess I don't understand is if you can use it for playgrounds and for a study to have it engineered, it seems like you could eat up the $250,000 and then you still have nothing. You don't even have a stake in the ground. And then you're gonna have to ask for the full amount down the road. So, is that true? Is it true that you can spend the $250,000? One.
I'd like to clarify a few things with Dudley, so thank you.
So those were two good points from Dudley and from Joan. And just to clarify what it is that we're asking for. So we're asking for the establishment of a capital reserve fund to place $250,000 in for the stated purposes there. And the intention would not be to spend all of that in 1 year. And when we're talking about how do we construct a building, you need to incorporate into that project soft costs. And a large part of that $250,000 is to cover the soft costs. And Dudley, you're absolutely right. It would scare me if I got an estimate for a building to think that a year from after it was passed, we could actually build a building for that amount. I'm on the fire station committee, and it's one of our biggest reasons for being concerned about putting forth the fire station is that we really don't know how much it's going to cost. But what we haven't done for the building yet of this project is we haven't figured out all the nuts and bolts. And when you engineer a building, you decide how many nuts and bolts you need, how many 2x4s you need, what the door locks are going to be, what the hinges on the bathroom doors are going to be. And that's what you use soft costs for, is determine exactly what it is that you need. Does that translate into knowing exactly how much the building is going to cost to do? It absolutely does not. That's why you put contingency into a project. So if you estimate that a project is going to cost you $2 million, you put in $500,000 for contingency to cover those costs that are unknown that you face along the way of construction, because you're right, you do not know how much a building is going to cost. It's the same thing that we did for the fire station. That $5.7 million is way more than that building was probably going to cost to build. So when we say that this building would cost upwards of $2.5 million, that includes soft costs, which is part of the $250,000 that we're asking for now. And it would also include the cost of figuring out how many nuts and bolts are going to be in that building. As far as what that capital reserve fund is, if we were to appropriate the full $250,000 tonight, that would go into a capital reserve fund. And hopefully by this time next year, we'd be prepared to bring forth a warrant article asking for a bond, probably in the $2 to $2.5 million range. And if that were to be voted up by the town, then we would continue to use that capital reserve fund to fund that project. If the town were to vote that project down, then what we would probably ask the town to do at that point in time is dissolve that rest of the balance in that fund, whatever's left in there. And that would go back to the taxpayers.
That sounds great.
You just tell me who to hand it to.
All the way to the back.
Hi, my name is Tony DeLuca. What concerns me here is, and I know that this is definitely constructed on the basis of goodwill, but at 42 years in education, so I'm just saying that for another perspective. What concerns me the most is a much larger issue, And that is that I wish the town could find a way to come up with a more carefully coordinated strategic plan. 2 months ago, we were debating the firehouse. Now here it is, a couple of months later, and we're discussing the school. And I think particularly in this moment post-COVID, Dudley's, about costs, construction, et cetera, we do not know what the future enrollments are going to be. And I think you could create a laundry list of things that are of, shall we say, concern that cannot yet be determined. So I would suggest, if it's possible, that a strategic plan be created that prioritizes the needs of the town and includes all of the needs, and include a timeline so that we have an idea of what's coming when, so we can look at these issues from a much larger and longer perspective. I think that would help people feel more comfortable when it comes to making these very serious decisions. I agree with Paul. For what purpose? As of this evening, I don't see that purpose to be clearly demonstrated to warrant $250,000. I am also concerned, not just with cost overruns, but the slippery slope syndrome. Well, we invested $250,000 in this, so we should go forward. I think we should not do that, and look at the larger picture of the town from a much broader perspective. I also want to say something that has nothing to do with this article, but
Can I ask you to hold that, because I saw a number of hands in the room for people
well, it's a
who want
very
to
small
speak.
item. Can I just
If it's relevant to this article, I would love to hear it right now. If it isn't, I'm going to ask you to hold it for other
Okay, I'll
business
bring it
at the
up.
end.
May I bring it up at the end of this meeting?
Yes,
Okay,
we'll ask a
thanks.
question about other business, but I just want to get to the hands that are here that want to speak to this.
I'm Dave Mason, and I'm a little confused. Maybe you can straighten me out. A lady, whose name I'm sorry I missed, got up and said that the selectmen were going to come and we're going to work with the school board and we're going to figure out what the best approach to whatever it is. But it seems to me like the school board is moving forward with construction of a building, a renovation, and I understand why you feel a renovation is important. But what's the dichotomy here? We've got the selectmen are coming forward, they're going to propose something, going to work with the school. How are they going to work with the school board? Because the school board is moving forward in a direction that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the selectmen.
And there's a microphone behind you. Yep.
Is this on?
Please say
So
who you are again.
I think many people are saying the same thing in different ways, and I think the simplest way to say it is I would recommend no vote at this time. There's still money left over from last year for engineering and architectural services that can be used for the town to come together. I think this is what we're hearing is let's come together, let's look at this in its entirety and not so much in silos for a comprehensive planning and capital improvement process that best fits the needs of the entire community. As Barbara said, the town will be asking voters next week for $25,000 for a comprehensive planning process at the start. The last time, just a quick history, last time this was done was 20 years ago. The town came together, we looked at what we had and what we didn't have. We tore down an old barn here, we turned it into a library, we built a community center, we got a historical society, we got a town garage. Things happened because we planned for them. We just didn't go forward. I'm not convinced, regarding the school specifically, that another addition is the answer for a school of this size, especially with the potential very flat enrollment that we have. There will be bubbles in the future, of course, like there are now, there always have been, there always will be. But the creativity and openness and flexibility of the grammar school has always been one of its hallmarks. They've always responded to dips and highs and lows in numbers in both the facilities and the students, and I think they can do that again. I would encourage the leadership to use those tools rather than simply asking for $250,000 for a relatively solid process. Finally, I would also challenge the board and the leadership of the school to truly engage with Bartlett. They have needs and deficiencies. We have needs and deficiencies in addressing the challenges of both schools so the communities can look creatively and collaboratively at best addressing the educational needs of all the students in the community. Thank you. I know this work is hard. It sucks. I did it for a long time. I commend you for sitting up there and listening to all this. But, and I think moving forward, all of us together, we can get a really good product out there. Thank you.
I saw 2 more hands here, and I'm just going to ask for any of you who may be giving some thought to this, if you have a perspective or opinion that hasn't been shared, I would love you to raise your hand, because after we take these comments, and I saw a school board member raise a hand.
I just need to make a technical, Frank, if you could help move the camera so that people can see while they're watching online to who's speaking, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Hubble, I'm a parent of a recent JGS grad. I'm also on the Strategic Planning Committee. And I think I can provide a little bit of perspective that might help with a couple of the questions that people had here. So one of the questions, or actually a couple of questions were why, and why is the $250,000 needed? So this handout that you would have received when you walked in is our strategic plan. And if you go to page 12, under facility, you'll see a listing of the actions, responsibility status, and timing, which the, I forget his name, gentleman in the back was asking for, so you can see a lot of that plan laid out there. We did 3, I think, listening sessions in the fall that were open to the entire community. We had great turnout. We had recent JGS grads who were there. We had parents of JGS students, parents of JGS grads, and we had people who were generations removed from JGS, and everybody gave their input. And what you see under the action steps on page 12, which talks about hands-on learning space, a maker space, science, technology, and engineering labs, other sorts of co-learning spaces, as well as preschool, that came directly from our community. So those were items that people mentioned. So within those listening sessions, everybody was saying, we need this, we also need this. Nobody was saying, we need less of something. They were saying, we need more. We need better space, we need more space, we need more specific space for the learning. So that's a little bit of perspective and context around the why that's within, covered by the $250,000. And again, it's a pretty long document, but I mean, this does lay out the strategic plan for the school, what we would like to see done, who's responsible for it, and what the timeline is. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Do you have a microphone in the back?
I'm Sarah Kimball. I'm a long-term member of the planning board, and I'd like to refer to what Peter was talking about, which was the meeting that we had looking as to for facilities planning is what Marco was talking about. As a result of that, and about the same time, the planning board took on the task of creating a capital improvements plan, which is, if those of you who know your RSAs, is a task which is, the state says that it can be done by the planning board as or an aid to the Board of Selectmen in the planning. And what was done during that, the first time we went through it, was to consult with all of the different department heads, school, fire department, and so on, as to what they felt their needs were going to be looking into the future, 5-10 years ahead. And we compiled all of that and tried to get estimated costs and put that all in one plan and to see how that could be stretched out so that any one year you don't have a huge increase in your taxes, but that we were in. So using capital reserve funds, that if you're going to need a fire truck in 5 years, well, then you put enough money each year so that by the time you come to the actual need for that particular item, you have money and you don't have to have a big increase in the tax rate to cover that. And this was all done as part of the planning board's work. There was no additional money that was set that had to be voted on for this process to occur. And that this is within the RSAs having to do with the functions of the planning board and the possibility for that.
I thought I saw a couple of other hands, and I saw two, and they're folks we've heard from, so I just want to make sure that we catch anyone who has a comment or question, point of clarification that we haven't heard from. Paul, and then Sarah.
I'm Paul Lupniak again. I'm reading this article, and it says planning, design, construction, renovation. Now, as I listen to people talk, people at the board talk, it doesn't sound as if any construction is going to be done for $250,000. Is that correct?
So I thought we've been discussing that, but it's.
I think we've answered that question, Paul. I'm sorry. I mean, we talk about that in a few different ways tonight. So I don't think I need to go back. Is anyone really confused about like what we're raising? It would be going into a capital reserve fund. I understand that you might be thinking that it's not smart to spend the money on that, or you think it is smart to spend the money on that. But again, part of that money would be used for design. Some of that money may be used for construction. It's a capital reserve fund. It means we could use that money to be spent on construction at some point in time. Doesn't mean we would have to spend it on construction, but we could. So some of it could be used for construction, some of it could be used for design, and some of it could be used for planning.
So there will be more requests for money later.
So we're asking for, we're planning an addition to the school that would cost upwards of $2 million. So yes, there would be more money spent further down the line.
Thank you.
And again, it is a capital reserve fund. Any money that's left over there, if there's no more purpose for that, then we would be asking the town to dissolve that. If the town in the future does approve a bond for a $2 million, $2.5 million addition to the school, then that capital reserve fund could be spent on that. That's why we worded it that way, so that we wouldn't be trapped in having to spend that money only on design, or only on planning, or only on construction. It covers all three of those things.
Okay, thank you.
I saw one more hand, and it was Sarah's. So go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, Sarah Clemens. Again, I have a history here too, along with others of my children who went to school with Jerry at a 3-room schoolhouse, and I believe they received a very good education. And I would like to maybe sometime see how many of the kids, I mean, all of our kids have been very fortunate to go to this school, and I do appreciate that. But again, I'm going to say I believe with the information that we've got from our select person that is attending the meeting, that there is going to be a committee, or they're hoping to form a committee where the school and the select people and all the heads of the departments can get together, and we just were told that the planning board could help us out, which would be cost effective, and thank you. But this is a repeat, but I just think it's wrong for budgets to grow bigger and while family budgets get smaller due to inflation, higher heating, gasoline, electric, food, and other necessities for daily life. And I do believe this is the wrong time to be asking the taxpayers to go for $250,000.
Thank you all. I think we've had a really robust conversation, and I'm going to call for a vote unless there are any questions or points of clarification. Again, I think we've heard a lot of opinions, and it would be a good time to call for a vote. I see no questions. So there's been a motion made and a second for Article 6 to see if the school district will vote to establish the Jackson Grammar School Renovation and Construction Capital Reserve Fund. under the provisions of RSA 35-1 for the planning, design, construction, and renovation of the Jackson Grammar School, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 to be placed in this fund, further to name the Jackson School District as agents to expend from said fund. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Article 7, to transact any other business. Sorry.
What was the outcome of the vote?
I'm sorry, defeat.
Sasha, can I start this part and maybe what you're going to say, and then I can say something? Is there any other business? So, next month, in April, this is where this work begins again. Last April, this is where this work began. And it's a carryover from the previous school year. A lot of folks come and go from this conversation, and I'd like to make a community ask. With all due respect to the select board, we've been asking consistently for 2 years for their participation in this conversation. Thank you for being here tonight, Barbara. I hope that your presence is felt throughout the next year, so that next year when we get to this meeting, this conversation is very different. Folks in this community or this room tonight have shared concerns after a full kind of calendar year. Parents and people from the building. A lot of work went into the warrant articles for this evening, and I think that there was a lot of space for this conversation to happen throughout the year that brings us to this night with a more productive outcome. Folks think that our technology program and this kind of position that Gail is having such a hard time filling for our students could have been written and done differently. There are some people in the room that I think have been here and could have spoken up, and I think that it would have really mattered to the outcome of this evening. I'm hopeful that there are people at home tonight that aren't comfortable yet to be here, or they just can't be here for the makeup of their families, that will participate in the next calendar year to get us here next year with a lot more just productivity that comes out of all the work that we do throughout the calendar year. And so this is a really sincere ask for a lot more participation so that we can have a much more robust conversation, so that at the last moment, all of this doesn't come out to the community and leave a lot less room for changes to be made when the time is available.
Before we move to dissolve tonight's meeting, Article 7 is to transact any other business that will come before us. And I believe Tony had a point to make. We have a microphone back there. Thank you.
An old teacher has a bias here. Can the school committee or board consider the possibility, if not this year, next year, I know you've gone through your whole, I think it would be nice if we had a one-time only bonus for the teachers, for the exceptional work they've done the past 2 years to get us through COVID. Just a thought, just a suggestion, it's just an idea.
So in the budget that you just voted down, there were raises for our staff across the board. Yeah, but that was voted down, to be clear. So, that's incorrect? The additional positions.
So just to clarify, Tony, thank you for your comments there. Some people up here didn't hear what he had said. He was asking us to consider adding bonuses to the budget so that we could give bonuses to the teachers for the hard work and staff that they've been going through over the last 2 years to deal with COVID, was what the comment that he had made. Now, when you're talking about lowering our budget, Peter, it's not a give and take. Your motion was to consider to lower the budget by $100,000 with targeting the positions that we did. If we were to do that, Peter, we would be eliminating the positions of media specialist and technology. We would not have that position at all. No, Peter, I'm sorry. That's the way it works. Like, so you're lowering the budget by that. If we were specifically to target it, we would have no money in the budget to hire a media specialist or, well, you can't have it both ways, Peter. We can't lower the budget by $100,000, eliminating those two positions, and then we would still have money to give the current staff the bonuses that we were talking about, yes. But we still have to have a media specialist and technology person, so we can't eliminate those positions. So we have to find money in the budget from somewhere else to now be able to hire a technology person and a media specialist. Now we have no money in the budget to hire either. So we have to get extremely creative on how we do that. We'll be looking to cut all the way across the board in order to deal with that $100,000 reduction.
But that's not really germane to this article.
I think Peter.
Did I see one other hand?
Well, I think we deserve to hear from Peter because it was kind of directed at him.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get into I don't want to get into.
I'm not sure that this is the moment to get into a back and forth discussion, but if there's a comment or a question or motion on business, Tish, I'm going to bring this to you, and then Ken, Sarah, and Tony.
Hi, I understand that last year there was 70,000 allocated towards. It appears to be similar to the 250 that it was towards looking into the renovation and plans for an addition or what they need for the school. And at the last meeting, I had asked how much was spent, and they didn't know. But since then, I've heard from the SAU that 26,000 of the 70,000 was spent, leaving a considerable amount of money. Where does that money go in terms of the budget?
So that was appropriated in our operating budget in the current
Budget year, so we could still spend it this current budget year on June 30th, then that money goes back to taxpayers. And just for point of order and clarification, this is to discuss any other business. Article 1 was already discussed, and the other articles were already discussed, so it's not really time for that.
I have a question. The federal government has been handing out money to schools and to towns. I'm assuming that SAU 9 got monies, and so did Jackson, or have they not got any?
Jackson got an initial payment of, I can't quote the exact number, but it was about $10,000. We have gotten no more ESSER fund money while the other communities have.
We had no money in this current budget year, but last budget year that we've gotten money.
So I see two more hands, and I just want to reiterate something that Jerry said. This moment is for any other business. I am sure these individuals would be happy to answer questions about line items, future income, state funding at their next board meeting. But for the interest of this evening, if there's any other business questions, we're going to take those now, and then we're going to move to wrap up the meeting. I saw Ken and Tony.
Yeah, just for clarification, and I don't want to put words in Tony's mouth, but I think he was recommending a bonus, which is different than a salary raise. A bonus is a one-time for extra performance, and I think what he was recommending here was a bonus relative to the extra effort that came in because of COVID. That is entirely different than a raise.
Thank you. And I think the school board members, you've heard that. Yeah? Terrific.
Yeah. Thank you for saying what I was going to say. I wanted to emphasize that it was for this year, perhaps to be considered for next year, and that it's one time only. I want to reiterate that myself, because that's what it was, the suggestion.
Thank you. We're going to take one more comment, question from Jerry.
In this article, it's inappropriate to discuss money issues. So I'm just saying, you're not following the rules.
It's actually not. Tony's comment was perfectly appropriate. You can't appropriate money during this article. You can talk about money if you want to.
And I think those comments were heard.
Yeah.
Terrific. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion this evening to dissolve this meeting with appreciation for all the contributions that were made tonight. Is there a motion? And a second? From Lauren. Thank you very much, everyone.